What if your daughters vanished without a trace, and the only clue was their blood-stained wagon, hidden for 9 years in a forsaken mine? This is the gut-wrenching true story of a mother who defied her world to unearth a truth so dark it'll haunt you forever. Hey, don't forget to like. Please subscribe for more shocking crime stories, and hit the bell icon. The darkest truth are yet to come. Picture a golden July evening in 2005, in the heart of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, where the rolling hills glow under a fading sun and the air carries the sweet scent of clover. In a quiet Amish community, two sisters, 17-year-old Hannah and 15-year-old Esther Stoltzfus, are guiding their family's wagon home from the Strasbourg market. Their laughter dances on the breeze, mingling with the steady clop of their horses' hooves. They're carrying hand-stitched quilts, the kind their mother, Lydia Stoltzfus, taught them to make, vibrant with patterns that draw tourists' dollars. But that night, the wagon never reaches home. By dawn, Lydia and her husband Daniel are gripped by a terror that claws at the soul. Their girls are gone, no note, no trace, just an aching silence where their voices should be. The community whispers they ran away, lured by the forbidden English world beyond the fields. But Lydia knows her daughters' hearts. A mother always knows. And when their wagon is found in 2014, buried in an abandoned mine, stained with blood, the truth begins to unravel, a truth so sinister, it'll make your heart pound. I first read about this case in a faded newspaper clipping, tucked in a Lancaster library's archive, its edges curling like it held secrets too heavy to bear. It wasn't just the mystery that gripped me. It was Lydia's relentless love, a mother who broke every rule of her faith to find her girls. This isn't just a crime story. It's about a woman who stared into the void and kept going, driven by a bond stronger than fear. It's the kind of story that creeps into your thoughts at night, whispering questions you can't shake. Let's step back to that summer in 2005. The Stoltzfus family lived the Amish way. Simple, devout, rooted in tradition. No electricity, no cars, just faith and the rhythm of the land. Their farmhouse, whitewashed and modest, sat nestled among cornfields, its windows glowing with lantern light. Hannah was the dreamer, her eyes bright with curiosity, always sketching barns and wildflowers in a leather-bound notebook she kept hidden under her mattress. She'd hum hymns while working, her voice soft but sure. Esther, 2 years younger, was her shadow, quieter, with a shy smile and a habit of weaving daisies into her braid. They were inseparable, the kind of sisters who shared secrets under the stars, their whispers blending with the night's hum. That July day, they'd gone to the Strasbourg market, a bustling hub where Amish vendors sold quilts and jams to tourists. It was a routine trip, one they'd made since they were old enough to handle the reins. Lydia helped them load the wagon, her hands lingering on Hannah's shoulder. "Be careful," she said, her voice light but laced with a mother's instinct. "Be home for supper." The girls nodded, their bonnets bobbing, and promised to return. Lydia watched the wagon fade into the dusk, the creak of its wheels a familiar comfort. She couldn't know it was the last time she'd see them. When night fell and the wagon didn't appear, Lydia's heart began to race. By midnight, the house felt too quiet, the absence of her girls like a weight on her chest. The Amish don't often turn to outsiders, their Ordnung. The unwritten code of their faith urges self-reliance and separation from the English world. But Daniel, his face pale, borrowed a neighbor's phone and called the police. The search began at first light. Officers combing the market road, questioning vendors, searching fields. But there was nothing, no wagon, no footprints, just a single witness who mentioned a gray pickup truck lingering near the market stalls that evening, its driver obscured by a cap pulled low. The police followed the lead, but it went nowhere. The truck was a ghost, like the girls. The community rallied, holding prayer vigils, their lanterns flickering in the summer heat. But whispers grew, sharp and cutting. Maybe Hannah and Esther wanted out. Maybe they'd heard too many stories about the world beyond its music, its lights, and ran to it. The Amish call it Rumspringa, a time when youth explore before committing to the faith. But Lydia knew her girls weren't like that. Hannah loved her sketches, her faith. Esther clung to her family like a lifeline. They'd never leave us, Lydia said, her voice trembling but fierce, her eyes daring anyone to argue. She shut out the gossip, but it stung like a slap. Years passed, and the case grew cold. By 2008, the police had shelved it, labeling the girls runaways. The world moved on, but Lydia couldn't. She kept their room untouched, Hannah's notebook open to a half-finished sketch of a barn, Esther's flower crown wilting on her pillow. Every evening, she'd walk the market road, her lantern casting shadows, as if the dirt could tell her where her girls went. Imagine that kind of pain knowing your children are out there, somewhere, and no one believes they didn't choose to leave. Would you stop searching, or would you keep going, even if it meant tearing your life apart? Lydia's faith was her strength, but it was also her burden. The Amish live by Gelassenheit, surrendering to God's will, accepting loss without anger. The bishop counseled patience, urging her to trust in God. "Let them go, Lydia," he said softly. But letting go felt like betrayal. She'd lie awake, replaying that last goodbye, Hannah's smile, Esther's wave. A question gnawed at her. What if they didn't run? What if someone took them? She started asking questions, talking to English neighbors, even visiting the police station acts that raised eyebrows in her community. The elders frowned, her neighbors whispered, but Lydia didn't care. She wasn't just a mother. She was a hunter now, chasing the truth. In 2014, everything changed. A group of cavers exploring an abandoned mine near Quarryville, 15 miles from the Stoltzfus farm, stumbled on something chilling. Deep in a crumbling shaft, half buried under rocks, was a wagon, rotted, splintered, but unmistakably Amish, with the Stoltzfus family's mark carved into the side. Inside were quilts, their vibrant patterns dulled by time, stained with something dark, blood. The police cordoned off the site, and when Lydia got the call, her world tilted. She drove to the mine in a borrowed car, a sin in her community, her hands shaking on the wheel. The mine was a forgotten place, its tunnels snaking into darkness, a place locals called cursed. How did the wagon get there? And where were her girls? The discovery hit the news, and I remember reading it, my stomach twisting. It wasn't just the wagon, it was the details. Esther's hair ribbon, tangled in the debris, its blue fabric faded but unmistakable. A single shoe, Hannah's, caked in mud. Forensic tests confirmed the blood was human, but 9 years underground had degraded the DNA beyond identification. The police called it a crime scene, theorizing the girls had been taken, maybe killed, but the mine held no more answers. No bodies, no weapons, just echoes. Lydia saw it differently. That wagon wasn't a grave, it was a thread, pulling her closer to the truth. She threw herself into the case, defying her community's rules to work with the police. She pored over reports, visited the mine, stood at its mouth as if she could hear her girls calling. The community urged her to stop, to accept God's will, but Lydia's faith had shifted. It wasn't just about God now. It was about justice. Her search led her to a name, Jacob Yoder, a man who'd left the Amish in 2002 after a bitter feud with his family. Jacob was trouble excommunicated for stealing from his father's farm. He'd settled in a rundown trailer park near Quarryville, scraping by as a mechanic. Locals knew him as a loner, his temper flaring like a match. Some remembered his gray pickup at the Strasbourg market in 2005, parked too long near the Amish stalls, his eyes lingering on the girls. I can't imagine facing someone like that. Picture standing outside a sagging trailer, the air thick with grease and menace, knowing the man inside might hold the key to your children's fate. Would you knock? Lydia did. She tracked Jacob to his trailer, her bonnet out of place in the grimy lot. "What do you know about my girls?" she asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Jacob leaned against the doorframe, his smirk cold. "Don't know nothing," he said, but his eyes flicked away, like he was guarding a secret. Lydia didn't buy it. She started watching him his late-night drives, his trips to a warehouse near the mine. She didn't tell Daniel or the bishop. This was her mission, her burden. Lydia's days became a blur of watching and waiting. She'd sit in a borrowed car, parked down the road from Jacob's trailer, noting his routines. He'd leave at odd hours, his pickup rumbling toward the warehouse, a squat building surrounded by weeds. She overheard a neighbor say Jacob had been obsessed with the Amish, bitter about his shunning, muttering about making them pay. It was enough to keep her going. One evening, she followed him to the warehouse, her heart pounding as his taillights disappeared into the dark. What was he hiding? She couldn't shake the feeling that the answer was close. Then, Lydia did something unthinkable for an Amish woman. She broke into the warehouse. It was a reckless act, against every rule of her faith. But love makes you cross lines you never thought you would. Under cover of midnight, she slipped through a rusted gate, her flashlight trembling in her hand. The warehouse smelled of oil and decay, its shadows swallowing the light. She searched frantically, rifling through crates, her breath hitching with every creak. In a corner, she found a locked metal box, its edges rusted but sturdy. With a crowbar she'd brought God forgive her, she pried it open. Inside was a stack of photos. Hannah and Esther at the market, their faces bright, unaware they were being watched. A notebook lay beneath, filled with dates, places, and a map with the mine circled in red ink. Her blood ran cold. Was this proof? Or was she chasing shadows? She didn't have time to think. Headlights swept across the warehouse, cutting through the dark. Jacob was back. Lydia froze, clutching the photos, her heart slamming against her ribs. His boots thudded on the concrete, each step closer. If he found her, what would he do? She was alone, miles from help, in the lair of a man who might have taken her daughters. The door rattled, a key scraped in the lock, and the warehouse door creaked open, and Lydia Stoltzfus crouched behind a stack of crates, her breath shallow. The photos of her daughters, Hannah and Esther, clutched to her chest. Jacob Yoder's boots echoed in the dim, oil-soaked space, each step a hammer against her nerves. She was alone, miles from her Amish community in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, in a place she had no business being. The flashlight in her hand trembled, its beam flickering across the rusted tools and scattered papers. If Jacob found her, what would he do? The man she suspected of taking her girls in 2005 wasn't just angry. He was dangerous. And now, with those photos and that notebook in her hands, Lydia was closer to the truth than ever. But was it a truth she could survive? Let's rewind a moment. If you're just joining us, you need to know what brought Lydia here. In July 2005, her daughters, 17-year-old Hannah and 15-year-old Esther, vanished after a trip to the Strasbourg market. The Amish community whispered they'd run away, chasing the English world. But Lydia knew better. For 9 years, she clung to hope, keeping their room untouched. Hannah's sketches, Esther's flower crown, while the police called it a cold case. Then, in 2014, their wagon was found in an abandoned mine near Quarryville, stained with blood, alongside Esther's ribbon and Hannah's shoe. It wasn't a grave, it was a lead. Lydia's search led her to Jacob Yoder, a bitter ex-Amish man with a gray pickup and a grudge. And now, in his warehouse, she'd found photos of her girls and a map marking the mine. But as Jacob's shadow loomed closer, the question wasn't just what he'd done, it was what he'd do next. I remember reading about this case and feeling my heart race. Not just for the mystery, but for Lydia's courage. Imagine sneaking into a place like that, driven by nothing but love for your children. Would you risk it all, knowing you might not walk out? Lydia did. And it's that raw, human strength that makes this story unforgettable. Jacob's flashlight swept the warehouse, its beam grazing the crate where Lydia hid. She pressed herself lower, the photos crinkling against her chest. Her mind raced. Those pictures Hannah laughing at the market, Esther adjusting her bonnet weren't casual snapshots. They were deliberate, taken from a distance, like a predator stalking prey. The notebook, with its dates and the mines circled in red, felt like a confession. But it wasn't enough, not yet. She needed more, something undeniable to take to the police. Jacob's voice broke the silence, muttering to himself, "Damn kids, always poking around." He was close, too close. Lydia's heart pounded so loud, she was sure he'd hear it. Then, his phone rang, a sharp trill that made her flinch. He cursed, answered it, and stepped outside, his voice fading. Lydia exhaled, but she knew her time was short. She moved fast, stuffing the photos and notebook into her apron, then scanning the warehouse for anything else. In a corner, she found a locked filing cabinet. Her crowbar was still in hand, and with a desperate heave, she cracked it open. Inside were more photos, not just of Hannah and Esther, but of other Amish girls from the market, their faces unaware, their lives exposed. There were receipts, too, for supplies: rope, duct tape, a tarp. Her stomach churned. Was this what he'd used? She grabbed what she could, her hands shaking, and slipped out the back, her bonnet snagging on a nail as she fled into the night. Lydia didn't go home. She couldn't. Instead, she drove to a diner on Route 30, a place no Amish woman would be caught dead in. Sitting in a corner booth, her hands smudged with rust and fear, she spread the photos and notebook on the table. The dates matched July 2005, the day her girls vanished. The map showed the mine, with notes about access points and no witnesses. She needed to know if Hannah and Esther were still out there, alive, or if that blood in the wagon was the end. I can't imagine sitting there, staring at those photos, knowing they might be the last trace of your children. Would you keep going, or would the weight of it break you? Lydia took her findings to the police the next morning, her bonnet drawing stares in the station. The detective, a grizzled man named Callahan, listened, but was skeptical. "This is circumstantial," he said, flipping through the notebook. "No hard evidence tying Yoder to the girls." Lydia's voice shook with fury. "He watched them, he planned it, look at the map." Callahan promised to investigate, but she saw the doubt in his eyes. The Amish were outsiders here, their case is often dismissed as their problem. Lydia left the station, her resolve hardening. If the police wouldn't act, she would. She started tailing Jacob again, more carefully now. She borrowed a neighbor's car, parked it down the road from his trailer, and watched. Jacob was paranoid, checking his mirrors, locking his warehouse tight. One night, she followed him to the mine itself. He parked his pickup at the entrance, grabbed a flashlight, and disappeared into the tunnels. Lydia waited, her pulse racing, then followed, her own flashlight dimmed to avoid detection. The mine was a labyrinth, its air damp and heavy, the walls jagged with history. She moved slowly, her footsteps muffled, but every drip of water sounded like a gunshot. Deep inside, she heard Jacob's voice, low and angry, talking to someone. Someone else was there. Lydia crept closer, her heart in her throat. Through a narrow passage, she saw Jacob standing over a figure bound, gagged, alive. It was Hannah. Her hair was longer, her face gaunt, but it was her daughter, alive after 9 years. Lydia nearly cried out, but she clamped a hand over her mouth. Hannah was in a makeshift cage, a rusted metal frame in a hidden chamber. Jacob was pacing, muttering about keeping her quiet. But where was Esther? Lydia scanned the shadows, desperate, but saw no sign of her younger daughter. Her joy at finding Hannah warred with dread. What had happened to Esther? She wanted to rush in, to save Hannah. But Jacob was armed, a glint of metal at his waist. Lydia was no match for him. She backed away, her mind racing. She needed help, but who could she trust? The police hadn't believed her. Her community had turned its back. She returned to the diner, her hands shaking as she called Callahan from a payphone. "I saw her," she whispered. "Hannah's alive. In the mine. You have to go now." Callahan hesitated, but something in her voice, raw, desperate, convinced him. He assembled a team, and by dawn, they raided the mine. What they found was worse than anyone imagined. Hannah was there, malnourished but alive, locked in that cage. She was 26 now, her eyes haunted, her voice barely a whisper. She told the police Jacob had taken them that night in 2005, luring them with a story about a hurt horse. He'd driven them to the mine, where he'd kept them hidden, using the wagon to stage their disappearance. But Esther, Hannah's voice broke as she spoke. Esther had fought back, refusing to stay quiet. Jacob, in a rage, had killed her that first night, her body buried somewhere in the mine's depths. The blood on the quilts was hers. Jacob was arrested, his trailer and warehouse searched. The photos, the notebook, the receipts, they all pointed to him. He'd been obsessed with the Amish, blaming them for his shunning, targeting their girls to punish the community. Hannah was the only one he'd kept alive, a twisted trophy of his control. The police searched the mine for Esther's remains but found nothing conclusive. The tunnels too vast, too unstable. Jacob refused to talk, his smirk gone but his silence deafening. Lydia brought Hannah home, but it wasn't the reunion she dreamed of. Hannah was a ghost of herself, haunted by years of captivity and her sister's death. The Amish community welcomed her back, but the whispers never stopped about Lydia's defiance, about Hannah's tainted return. Lydia didn't care. She'd found one daughter, but the loss of Esther was a wound that wouldn't heal. She still walked the market road sometimes, imagining Esther's laugh, wondering if her body would ever be found. This case stays with me, not just for the crime, but for what it says about us. Lydia fought a system, a faith, and a monster, all for love. But at what cost? She saved Hannah, but lost Esther, and a part of herself. Imagine living with that, knowing you won, but never whole again. It makes you wonder, how far would you go for the truth, and what would you sacrifice to find it? Well, have you ever heard of a case like this? Comment your thoughts. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and catch you in the next one.